Okay, so this is 8.3, our last 5 equivalency rules. So we'll just go through each of these 5. We'll talk a little bit about them, and then we'll do a really simple proof to kind of show you exactly what they're supposed to look like. So our next rule is distribution. Distribution, it looks like there's a lot going on, but it's a really simple pattern. So, for example, if you have a conjunction that looks like this, right? All you have to do really is you make 2 separate disjunctions, right? With what was outside being each of those new little ones, and of course, right, putting the Q there and the R there. It's really, it's really one of those things where it's something I probably, even having done proofs a bunch, wouldn't do just straight from memory. I would say, okay, that pattern right there, or right there, or right there, or right there, that looks like a distribution pattern. I'm going to check my rule list, which will be provided for you on the test. Oh yeah, it is a pattern. It looks just like this one. So what can I change it into? Okay, I can change it into that. Or maybe I have this and I can change it into that. But it's probably something you want to glance at, just so you can make sure that everything goes in its right place and you don't get your signs mixed up. But it's a really straightforward pattern, and it's fairly useful because it allows you to get something new, just like all the equivalency rules. So a small proof where this might be used in, right? I've got something going on here, right? Immediately I'm looking at this. I don't necessarily 100% know it's a distribution pattern, but it looks like it could be. There's a lot of wedges and dots flying around, and I think, okay, this might be a match for distribution. So I go check my distribution list, and look, right there, right? I've got a match. There's the 3 things that it takes to be, right, a distribution. I've got a dot, right? I've got a wedge there. Where the P's are, there's Q's, and where the P's are, there's these B's. Where the Q's are, there's an A, and there's a tilde F right there. So I've got that pattern, right? So I don't necessarily know what's going to happen, right? I don't know necessarily how the proof's going to end, but I see that pattern, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that and see where it gets me. So because I have a match for this, I can change it into something that looks like that. So I got B on the outside, wedge, right, and A, dot, and then I don't have an R, I'm dealing with tilde F. Close parentheses. So that is just line 1 rearranged through distribution. Okay, so now I've got that. Maybe I can do something with it. Do you see the match? Look right there. Now we've got that going on, so we have a pattern for DS. Right? Don't forget the basics. They're going to still be a major part of these proofs. The equivalency rules are just going to supplement it. But our modus ponens, modus tollens, DS, all those guys, those are the workhorses. You're going to see those over and over again. So I've got that now. Well, the conclusion is tilde F, so this is a pretty straightforward jump after that, right? Tilde F through 4 simplification. Again, looks way more complicated than it is because these are longer, but the big thing is check your rules that will be listed to find the pattern and then switch it. If you have that, switch to that. If you have that, switch to that. That's going to allow you to do something that you might not have been able to do in the past. So that's distribution. So next up we have exportation. Exportation is all about the conditionals, right? So exportation says, right, if you've got a conjunction over here on the left side, right, then of an arrow, then you can go ahead and just push those parentheses down, right? Push them down. So now we've got parentheses over the last 2 letters and change the original dot into an arrow. That's all it is. Or going backwards, right? Slide the parentheses to the left, and then change the first arrow to a dot, right? That's all exportation is. To kind of show you this proof, this actually works out the logic behind it. All right, so looking at this, again, I don't know everything that's going to happen to the proof, but I see that that looks like an exportation match. And the reason why I know that looks like an exportation match is because of the amount of practice problems I've done. The more practice problems you see, the more you're going to be able to see these patterns. That is 100% the only way to do it. There's no substitution for practice problems on your own. Because to me that screams exportation pattern. But if you're looking at that saying, I have no idea, the only thing that separates people that see that pattern and don't see that pattern is the amount of practice problems they've done. So now that you've watched this, you can just jump on the web tutor and do those practice problems. So I see that this matches up with that, right? So I'm going to make it look like that. So I'll slide my parentheses to the left and change the first arrow to a dot. Now you probably realize that you could have just done modus ponens twice, right? Done all that. But again, that's kind of the logic behind this. It's an abbreviated version of that. EXP, right? So this is a perfectly valid way of doing it as well. Now I've got this conjunction over here on the left side, so if I just use my conj rule, right, I can form the left side of this conditional through combining 1 and 4 conj, right? And then finally, now that I've got that taken care of, I can on line 6 finally get H from lines from lines 4 and 5. MP, right? So that's all exportation is moving parentheses around and changing arrows to dots or dots to arrows. It's really pretty straightforward. Again, the more you do, the easier it gets to see. This rule is really probably the most simplest rule, redundancy. Basically saying that if you have P and P, then you can just conclude P, though you could get that through simplification if you wanted. The one time it's really useful is when you have a disjunction where both sides are the same. If both sides are the same, if, like for example, you can have pizza for dinner or you can have pizza for dinner, well, you can just conclude that you're going to have pizza for dinner, right? So whenever the sides of the disjunction match, you can just get rid of one of them and just get that by itself. So looking at this problem right here, it's pretty straightforward. Right, I've got a disjunction. Anytime you see a disjunction that matches, just go ahead and do redundancy. It's probably what you need to do. So I see that I have a disjunction, right, with the exact same thing on both sides. So I'm just gonna, right, through redundancy, get that from line 1, RE. And now that I've got that, oh look, I have a match for good old modus ponens on lines 2 and 3. So redundancy is a really straightforward rule. If you have, the only time it's really going to become necessary is if you have the same thing on either side of a wedge. Then you can just get it. Right? That's redundancy. Our next rule is a long one. Again, it's one of those that looks complicated, but really isn't that bad. And it's our one rule that deals with biconditionals. So if you have a biconditional, you can turn it into this up here. Or you could turn it into this down here. Just depending on what you want to do or what the proof calls for. It's completely up to you which one you want to use. And you actually, this is one of those rules where you might do material equivalence, do ME, get something that looks like the top one, work the proof for a while, realize that really wasn't the way you wanted to go, scratch it out, go back, do material equivalence, and make it look like the bottom one. It's really completely up to you. So, right, basically it's the idea of getting, right, 2 of those, right, with a dot in the middle, 2 arrows with a dot in the middle, or you can kind of go, right, a different route and get a wedge that looks like that. Right? But these 2 things are equal, and these 2 things are equal. Right? So, looking at this, okay, I see that I want tilde H. I'm just going to try it. Let's try the top one, see what happens. So I know that through material equivalence I can get those 2 conditionals on either side of that dot. So I'm going to get A arrow tilde H and tilde H arrow A through 1 ME, right? Well, what can I do maybe now on line 4? Nothing that I really see. Well, this is just a big old conjunction, right? What if I simplify it? Right, I can get this side by itself, and I think that's actually going to let me go somewhere. So let me try to get that, right, I just simplified line 3 to get that down here because it's just a big dot, right? The dot is the main connector. So 3 simp. Okay, and hey, look at that. I have that pattern right there. And remember, always stay focused on your conclusion. So I have tilde H from lines 2 and 4 MP, right? Again, it looks more complicated than it is. Definitely want to refer to your notes just to make sure that you're translating all the right symbols in the right places, because that's an easy little mistake to make if you just put a wedge here and a dot there or something like that. It can mess the whole thing up. So definitely for these longer ones like distribution and material equivalence, check your listings on the notes just to make sure that you're doing it right. Our final rule is MI, which comes up quite a bit. Basically, if you have an arrow, you can turn the arrow into a disjunction as long as you put a tilde in front of the left side. Or if you have this business, right, with a disjunction and a tilde on the left side, you can turn it into that by just changing the arrow or changing the wedge to an arrow and taking the tilde away. You can go this way or that way. So, right, a pattern that is really useful, sometimes hard to see, but one that comes up all the time. So be on the lookout for that one. This one's like second maybe to De Morgan's in terms of the frequency with which it occurs. So looking at this pattern, all right, obviously you could do modus tollens right off the top. You see that? But maybe you don't. So I'm not seeing modus tollens. What if I just use line, right? Anytime you have a conditional, you can use material equivalence, or sorry, material implication. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. I put a tilde in front of the left side and change the arrow to a wedge. 1 MI. Always okay. Always an option to do that to a conditional. What can I do? Well, look at there. I have a match for disjunctive syllogism with my K's, right? So tilde B from line 2, 3, D, S. All right, I went through that fast, but there's really not too much to this rule. It's pretty straightforward, but it's really, really important. So please make sure that you're paying attention to it and try to learn it the best you can. Again, can't hammer this home enough. There's no substitute for practice. Practice, practice, practice on the web tutor. Practice on your own. Watch this again if you have to, but really hit home the web tutor. 8.3c is really a great place to practice. That's a pretty good place. So good luck, and we'll start with CP and RA in the next videos.